Your screen share as well. You just go to the red one. There we go.
Hello, can everyone hear me? Thanks so much for coming today. Oh, Joni, you can't hear me? Okay, you can, you're laughing, that's good. All right, so we're here for an interesting discussion to hear more from you, what you'd like to know about housing for seniors, specifically LGBTQ2 plus seniors, and also about long-term care going forward. So we have two wonderful volunteers from OSPN here today. We have George Hartsbrough, who is on the coordinating committee of OSPN as well as the housing committee. He's also involved in housing with the Council on Aging and helping with housing at Capital Rainbow Refuge for housing for newcomers. And this is Rick. He is on OSPN's long-term care committee, and he was a long-term care administrator for 30 years in BC all the way to Ontario. It's true. And he can share more information about the different kinds of long-term care centers that work at, or work, yes. Okay, so I'll let you two start. And for the people who are here on Zoom, if you have a question, please write it in the chat.
So welcome everybody. What we're going to do today is we're going to do as much as answering your questions as we possibly can. That I think will be the most useful thing because we all have questions and everybody's situation is a little bit different. So just to start things off, I'm just going to do a little bit of sort of brief overview of the sort of things that I think are important. This cord sometimes cuts out, so if it cuts out, just let me know. We're going to start with housing in wherever you are right now. So some people are in apartments, some people are in houses. I don't think anybody here at the present time is in a retirement home or a long-term care. But we're going to look sort of at the progression. And we're going to talk about where you are now, where you may be in a few years. And then that can lead into areas of a retirement home or long-term care. So we're going to try and cover the full broad spectrum of it. And some people already did write in some questions, so we're going to try and go through those questions, which hopefully will prompt you to think about some particular questions that you may have. So that's it. And also, it turns out that I actually did a presentation as part of the Council on Aging, Smart Aging program. And here it is. And the workshop that I did happened to be on exploring housing options. So I'm pretty familiar with a whole lot of the stuff that we discussed there. And they had a very interesting way of doing it. They had questions for people to ask of themselves, and they had an opportunity for people to jot down what their thoughts were, some checklists of where I am now, where will I be in 5 years. They talked about issues around the economics of it, the issues around what happens if I break a hip, or things of that nature. So there was that, and we talked about things like accessible housing. As we all know, most of the LGBT community they want to age in place. And from everyone that I have talked to, the last thing they want to do is go into some type of seniors care place. So, with that in mind, that's sort of where we're going to start. I'm going to pass it over to Rick, and he's going to talk just a little bit about the idea of retirement homes and long-term care, which are very, very different animals. Because some people, I think, do not know the difference between long-term care and seniors residents, and they're very, very different animals. So, Rick, it's over to you.
Thank you, George. Appreciate that. Thank you all for inviting me to be here today. My history in employment is long-term care. And the reason that I agreed to come was partly because George agreed to come to my long-term care home when I worked in Ottawa. I ran Carlton Lodge. So George came to Carlton Lodge to help out with the project that I was doing there on equity and diversity. And that was to create an environment within a home of how LGBTQ people could live in the home without feeling isolated or different from other people living there. My true response to all of this is to say I'm really not an expert. Just have a lot of knowledge from having worked in long-term care. And I also know that there's a lot of people that have very simple but frightening questions. I will say that the halls of hell that you read about in the paper is not the experience that I have lived in any of the homes I've worked in, from private to municipal to cultural to for-profits. And that is the honest to God's truth. So in this project, as you're going through it, what George and we had this kind of discussion about, is it independence and then dependence? So what I would like to say is that it's living on your own to living when you can't live on your own. And that would be my line between George is going to take all of the living on my own, and I'm going to take all of the I really wanted to, but I can't now. And I have worked with people who, when I sent them on a leave, came back and were admitted into long-term care. So if you think that tomorrow is a guarantee that you're going to be able to stay where you are, I can guarantee you that it might not be. So if there are questions on care, me. If there's questions on how do I stay out of the care, that's George. If you have questions about which are generating fear for you,
Hello.
I'm here to say to you, you don't have to fear. You really don't.
Can you hear me?
I can show you why. Okay, George, back to you.
Okay, so I hope that sort of gives you an idea of where we're sort of going to go with this afternoon. So I wanted to sort of start with a couple of the questions that were sent in to us, and they're very general questions. And one of the questions was, what services are there to help me to be able to continue living in my own home as long as I am mentally able to? What services are not yet available to help people continue to live in their own home? And things like affordable housing, that seems to be a big issue for people. And I want to address the issue of what is termed affordable housing. Things about what about subsidized housing or condos or apartments? What about rentals? And that's going forward. And then I want to read a comment that I got. It wasn't exactly a question, but it's a situation that this person finds themselves in. And I think that's important because, again, as I said, everybody's situation is different. But this is a particular person that sent this in. And they said, I'm currently living in, it says, an Airbnb legacy room. which is below market rent. Recently, he's noticed that things seem to be moved in his room and that sort of thing, and he's really, really not very comfortable where he is. And he wanted to know what are his options. And he did then go on to say, and this is the important part, I will begin receiving a small pension at the end of the month. And I think when he means a small pension, he means the small pension. So that really creates challenges. And these are the types of challenges that I come across, especially with our newcomers. In my work with the Northern Lights Refuge, I'm one of the people of that support group. We support them for the first year, but after that first year, they're on their own. And some of them haven't found a job yet because their English isn't that good, or, you know, they may have credentials which are not recognized. So they go on Ontario Works. For people who don't know, the income that a person receives when they're on Ontario Works is $736 a month. Now, you tell me how you can find a place to live, feed yourself, get a bus pass on $736 a month. That makes it a real challenge in finding housing for these people. The other thing I wanted to talk about, just so that we're all on the same wavelength, and that is affordable housing. A lot of people think that what that means is that 30% of your income can be devoted to your accommodation, right? That is not always the definition that is used. When they say 30%, they don't mean your income, because let's face it, some people have really good incomes. They have incomes of $7,000 a month, $10,000 a month for some people. You know, that's only $120,000 a year. And for some of our government employees who are now retired, they're getting pensions that will bring that in.
Sure.
Yeah.
Can you just hold the microphone a bit closer?
Yeah. Does that work? Okay. So, $10,000 a month, 30% of that, that's $3,000 a month. That's fine. However, if that income is $1,000 a month, that's $300 a month. Yes, $300 a month. And you can't tell me you can find any combination at all at $300 a month. So, but here's the catch. The way it is often defined, and I think the city of Ottawa in fact uses this definition, is they use 30% of the average income of the demographic. So if you're in a particular ward and the average income for that particular ward of the city of Ottawa is $70,000, they use 30% of that $70,000. If you're only earning $40,000, you can see the difference. Big, huge difference. So, so that's important to keep in mind, is that when we're talking about affordable housing, the definition I am going to use is 30% of your income. So that for this discussion, then we're going to talk about that definition, not the skewed definition that others use. Okay? So, here's where we actually start answering questions, because we've talked long enough now, and so we're going to ask anybody who wants to ask some questions, whether it be about staying in your own home or what happens if, then send us your questions. And the way it's going to work, stand up, ask your question, and since I've got the microphone and it's not a remote microphone, I'll repeat the question so that everybody in the room hears that question, and then hopefully we'll be able to answer it. So, question number one.
Yes. And you also consider a community of tiny houses, which are affordable, and they're becoming quite popular in Europe and also on Vancouver Island, where people are living kind of in a community. It's perhaps maybe what we call similar to a co-op or to what is existing in a condo, administrations and together. Is that a possibility of having something that is affordable? And when I'm referring to tiny house, I'm not talking about those train containers either. Something that is has a bit more cachet, and is square rather than rectangular.
Okay, so here's the question. And the question was, what about tiny houses as a way of addressing the issue of housing? And those types of tiny house type communities where you have a communal type living, they do actually exist in Europe and become fairly common in Europe, and they've been used for various things in Europe. And also there are some on the West Coast. So the question was, have we considered, we collectively as the LGBT community, considered tiny houses here in Ottawa? Well, the simple question, or the simple answer to that is, it is not allowed under Ottawa bylaws at the present time. So, to even get to the point of even thinking about developing a tiny house community, first of all, the bylaws will have to be changed. And we all know that that is not an easy process. So, once the bylaw does get changed, then you have to find some place to locate this. And we all know that trying to find a plot of land downtown that's affordable is absolutely impossible. So it's going to have to be some type of tiny housing entity which exists someplace outside of downtown Ottawa for sure. So I think that answers your questions, but
Just in response to that, to let you know, my friend in Vancouver is trying to do the very same thing you're talking about in Abbotsford.
Yes.
And is getting a huge response. He has about 4 or 5 different people on his property, and they are in trailers, large ones, but trying to do the same thing using a center hub from an old barn.
Right.
It's creative. However, Abbotsford's going after it like crazy.
Okay.
In Salt Spring Island, my friend over there, their building codes and their bylaws are completely different. You can take an old tree, knock it down, hollow it out, and call that a home in Vancouver or on Salt Spring Island, or Gabriel or Gabriola or any of them in Salt Spring Islands or in the islands. However, you can't within the mainland either. So as you move out further, Kamloops, I have a friend who's thinking about something out there, but again, has been told quite clearly, not going to happen. The climate in the northern hemisphere makes it harder for septics, garbage, all of your aspects of it, and it makes it very difficult where when you're on the island of Salt Spring, I mean, it freezes maybe 4 days a year. You know what I mean? So it's a very different climate plays a great deal too. So that's what I know about.
But I know that the person I was referring to on Vancouver Island, she's near Courtney, and what she actually did was she bought an old camping site where they had cabins. I mean, and where, you know, they're rectangular and they have to cachet rather than like a shipping container.
Right.
And it's been going on for quite a, you know, number of years, but she calls it a commune because she has certain restrict, you know, by her own laws and things like that. But there's also a deposit that you have to put in, and there's quite a few, you know, for maintenance and so on, et cetera, et cetera. But I mean, that idea sounds quite enticing, you know, to have, but maybe
Okay,
outside of
so-
Ottawa, yes.
Thank you very much for that. I just want to double check to make sure that the people who are online are actually hearing what is being said in the room. So could we ask the question for those people who are online, just to write in the chat that you're actually hearing the conversation in the room or not, so that we can make sure that you continue to be included in the conversation. And we have another question over here.
Yeah, I just wanted you, ask you to tell me the bylaw that stops that from happening.
Okay, so the question was the bylaw which prevents us from doing tiny houses, does it only apply to creating a group of small tiny homes? The bylaw here in Ottawa does allow for you to have what's called a granny flat or granny suite on your own private property in the backyard. The conditions are that the electricity and municipal sewer and all that sort of thing have to be connected to the main house on the property, and the property has to be of a certain size. So it's a very, very small step towards tiny housing, but they are single ones in people's backyards, essentially granny suites.
Okay, so I was just thinking that there's all kinds of little spaces that are not being used all over the city. Like houses on those.
So the question was, there's all kinds of little tiny spaces all over the city of Ottawa, and why don't they put housing on those? Well, who are they, number one, and who owns the land, number two? So if it's city-owned land, then you'd have to purchase the property from the city. Big expense there, especially if it's downtown. And then secondly, a private person will have to develop that land. But again, presently the bylaws do not allow that. So, okay.
Yeah, just our online participant can hear, okay, fine, in here.
Okay, so this is good. So the online participants can actually hear what's happening in the room, so I'm glad to hear that.
Hi,
Yes.
hi, everybody. So I know, George, that you've done a lot of analysis around City of Ottawa housing. And I'm curious if you have kind of a list or there's somewhere that we can find a list of positive policies that the City of Ottawa has in place. Because I know, you know, when they're building a new building, do they have, you know, affordable housing at, you know, that kind of thing? Is it happening? And is there something that perhaps people should be doing about talking to their council members about the housing? I know there are some that are very positive about housing, but there must be kind of places that we can sort of encourage more communication with the policymakers on this. Yeah.
Okay, so did everybody hear that? Okay, so I'm not going to go through the process of repeating questions because obviously the people online can hear the questions and everybody here in the room can hear the questions. So hopefully I'll try and answer the question about, is there some type of master list of information, where you can find, a new project and
Positive, positive.
yes, and is there going to be some type of part of it that's affordable housing and how LGBT friendly is it and that sort of thing. So there isn't a particular list from the city of Ottawa. However, on the OSPN website, we have something called resources lists. And that resources list has a few options that are available at the present time. And there are organizations out there that, for example, if you need to move from where you are presently and you have to be looking at a senior residence or long-term care, there is an organization called Tea and Toast, and they will actually do that legwork for you. So you say to them, these are certain requirements, this is my, they ask you a whole series of questions about your income and your physical abilities and all that sort of stuff, right? And then they do the legwork of finding a place that's going to be suitable for you. And they're very LGBT friendly. So that's one resource right there. It's called Tea and Toast. And I worked with them before, and they've actually come and presented at OSPN discussions about housing also. And again, this is something from Council on Aging, which is a very useful thing. It's called Housing Options in Ottawa. This is the latest version of it. And not only does it have sort of housing options, and it talks about home ownership, renting, resources to help you stay in your home, because that was one of the questions that were there. And while we're talking about resources to help you stay in your home, so very often, if you want to stay in your own home, but you find that you need some help with doing some remodeling, putting grab bars in your bathroom and things like that, modifying your home to make sure that you can stay there as long as possible. Again, the resource list, there's a number of contractors that are listed there that are LGBT friendly, and they can help you make those modifications to your home. So, and there's also, if you need someone to come in and help you, there's a couple of resources also there of people who can provide assistance to you in your home. So there's that. And then there's residential living, which is seniors residences. So that's all in this book here. And also, it has things like this, things to consider. So, and this is available at the Council on Aging. So you can get this booklet from Council on Aging. And I would encourage every one of you to go through this, and it helps guide you along. There are probably things you said, well, I'll think about later. Maybe that doesn't really apply to me, but your circumstances may change. And then all of a sudden it applies. But if you've gone through this process of really thinking about it, at least you'll be sort of semi-prepared, if nothing else.
Where can people get that? Where's Council on Aging, and can they get it online?
Yes, so yes, you can get it online. You go to the Council on Aging website. And it is available online. And right now, Council on Aging is in the process of moving. And their new offices in the old Rideau High School are not yet finished renovations. But we should be up and running with Council on Aging in our new location in about another month or so, and you'd be able to get these there. Okay? So, other questions, things that may be weighing on people's minds. Again, anything to do with staying in your own home, what are my options? One of the questions that came up earlier is, I'm living in my home and I'm going to have to do some major repairs to my home. What assistance is out there? What is there any assistance as far as financing this? And my understanding is that there is a new government program aimed at helping people stay in their own home, and it'll cover the cost of repairs. No, it won't cover the full cost of repairs, but you can apply and it will cover a portion of the cost of those repairs. So I haven't got the full information. This is just a fairly new government program which has been announced. This is a federal program, not a City of Ottawa or provincial program, but it's a federal program. More information on that will be forthcoming once I find. And I invite all of you that, if you have questions after this session, my email is readily available, and you can send me questions and hopefully we'll be able to answer that afterwards. So, more questions?
Okay, so we're just going to ask a question. So I'm just going to tell you a little bit of something that I think you should know. And it's probably not something that you're thinking I need to know that. But one of the things that I found as the administrator of a care home was that I often had people who were frightened at the day of admission, afraid that they couldn't afford to live in long-term care. So I just wanted to ask, how many people think long-term care is going to be too expensive? Because I've seen the buildings, I mean, they are freaking huge, right? So it's quite expensive, but it's not. And the reason that it's not expensive is because everyone can afford long-term care. So what happens if I don't have enough money? Because the average cost for a room right now to start is about $1,900, then $2,200, and then about $2,400 to $2,600, depending, and those are privates. There are subsidies that are available to all people that are applicable to long-term care. Yes. There are subsidies available for all people who are applicable to long-term care. This is really hard. George did a really good job of this. So what happens is this, and it's very simple. When you go into long-term care, you have two reasons for going in. One, I physically can't stay where I am. I can't walk upstairs to get to my bathroom. Most common. Two, I don't remember where the bathroom is. Mental loss. So those are the only two things that you have to consider. Everything else, if everything else works, you're good to stay home, basically. However, if you do need to move in and you only have your OAS and your CPP, you're going to say, I don't have that much money coming in every month. So here's what happens. You walk in, the care home will fill all the forms out. They will send it into the ministry. And the difference between what you make, whatever that is, as an income, and what the cost is for the room is paid for by the government. It's provincial. And so the government will pay that price, and you get to keep about what's considered PIN money. You get to keep about $120 a month. So that gives you enough to get a carton of smokes or a 40 ounce or a John Livett or whatever you like. But you don't have anything else that you need to buy in long-term care. All your food's paid for, all your products, all your shampoos, toothbrushes are provided for free. All linens and everything else. I have a question.
Yes, however, what is the waiting list? Because I just experienced that a few months ago putting my mom in a care home, and we had to go private. Because there was no availability, because some places, they have as long as 7 years waiting list.
So the question about how long will it take is truly the same question that many people ask when they're sleeping with someone. Am I gonna get pregnant? You really don't know.
Yeah.
You're honest. How long that wait will be, I have no idea. However, if you are willing to say, I will take whatever room you have available, then you can go in pretty darn quick. Because what happens is you take a care home and families often want care homes close, because when George goes into the care home, I want to be really close to him so I can go and visit him. But to George, it really doesn't matter that I have to drive for 40 minutes. So if he took another home further away from me, I might, as the person in control, say no. George might say, I'd rather take that. So my response to that is, if you say to the assessor that you are willing to accept a crisis bed, meaning I can't stay at home, I'm at risk, they will then find you a bed within the province. So it may not be your first choice. But what I have found, and I've run, Carlton Lodge, for example, has a wait list right now of about 700 people, and that's going to put you probably about 5 years. It's a 5-star, and there's nothing you can do about it. However, that I've seen in care homes that are not as pretty is equal to that of the pretty house. So what I tell people when they need a place for their mother is walk in and don't look at it from your eyes. Look at it from the eyes of the people living there. Close your eyes and listen. Is it happy? Do you hear people laughing? Are things going on that you think, oh, this sounds really good, I want to be a part of this? Or are staff mad? Is there bells ringing all the time? And is there a PA saying, Rick, please come to the front office, Rick, please come to the front office? You know, that kind of stuff? You'll be amazed to find the kindness in a small community home. Elmont ran a great home in Elmont, fantastic. In Burnaby, in Vancouver, small little place, grew it up, it got big. There are many, many wonderful places. If you say, I don't need the really fancy place with the big pool and the big atrium in the front. So my response to that is, if you say I'm a crisis person, you will go in so fast. My neighbor just she put her mother in on the list on a Wednesday, and on Monday she was admitted. And she got admitted to a really good home. And so often when they move in, they stay, because once you've adjusted and get to know the people that are taking you to the bathroom, and that's an adjustment, I have to say. Once you get used to that, you're like, you know what, I think I'll stick with George. I think I'll stay here. Does that answer your questions? So what I'd like to say is you can afford long-term care. You might not be able to afford rent anywhere in the Lower Mainland or in Ottawa, but you will be able to afford a care home when you need the care, because you physically can't stay where you are or you mentally can't stay where you are. And don't go judge a book by its cover, please. Close your eyes, experience what they experience. Because as a senior sitting in a care home who has is so frail that they need to be there, what they really are going on is the care and the touch that they get from somebody when they are there. Rather than feeling frightened, they feel secure. That's the place that I would pick. And that's the advice I gave my neighbor. So, thanks, I appreciate that.
Question at the back.
Yeah, I wonder if you could address the issue of dementia, and particularly what happens when one partner of a couple needs dementia care. How does a couple stay together, or what are their options?
Those are really good questions. So one of the things is actually Senior Pride Network did a presentation on that just recently. So you can actually go to the OSPN website, and we recorded it on YouTube. So there'll be some information there, which I think would be helpful. That brings up a number of questions. What about if you're thinking, and I think from what you said, if you are being the caregiver of someone that you are living with who has dementia, sort of what are your options, okay? It's not an easy thing. There are things in the works, and it's been in the works for a little while now, is the okay, I'm old memories, see a bit of dementia happening here.
It's okay, George, it's okay.
See, it's all right. Anyways,
What was the question?
the people who used to be Victorian order nurses, which morphed into care for. Thank you very much. So care for, they do have a respite system where your partner or loved one or parent or whatever that you are caring for, they have a day program where you can take them to that day program. And they were looking at developing an LGBT only daycare program. So that for the LGBT community, you could take your loved one there, and they would be able to speak more freely about their partner, et cetera, because often when you have dementia, there's no filtering going on either. So they haven't got that in place as a specific one, but the Care For does have the dementia program right now. There are certainly people within that organization who are from our community and are fully aware of it, and they would be more than helpful in that respect. So hopefully that answers your question.
Well, George,
If I can, though, I just need to finish that, because you asked, I thought also within the response within long-term care, what do you do? I think that's where you were starting from. There are other options where you can have them at home. If it's looking at long-term care and one of the two partners is applicable for long-term care, it's rare that you get a couple that move in together. And even then, it's rare to have them in the same room, because you may have two beds in a room, but one's already occupied. So it wouldn't be fair to George to say, you need to leave your perfect room in order for Harry to come in with his husband. So it's a really, really difficult situation. However, I have known people who have been admitted into long-term care, and I hate to say this, but the truth of it is, the more you cry, the more you get. Squeaky wheel. And that is a truism that will hold through in long-term care, especially with a dementia. The more that you can prove that you are going to be in need of care, the more they'll support they'll have for you. Now, I'll pass it back over to you.
just to add to what George was saying, I'm in that situation right now. What I've benefited from both and I'm advocating for is a dementia society, which we have here in Ottawa. It's headquartered at the Rio Hurley, and they have a full-time staff that seems to be getting absolutely a large amount of money to provide support to people who are with dementia and people who are caring for it. All of the questions you have can be answered through that society, because they have trained social workers there, as well as they will give you a dementia coach, a person assigned to you, who you can always go to filter your, to ask questions, and they will give you the answer or find a way of getting it for you. It's a tremendous resource, and and some other people are in, back up and check it. That's part of it.
Thank you, Joe. Thanks.
And I think things.
And I would also add on to that is the Dementia Society are attuned to the LGBT community also. So be upfront. If you are talking about your same-sex partner or your parent who happens to be gay, then make that clear to them that you, this is a part of who they are as a person, and they will make sure that they find the appropriate person to assist you and guide you along the way. The Dementia Society is just absolutely fantastic, and like I say, very LGBT aware. And another question from the floor.
What importance do you attach to family involvement in the care of someone that is in a long-term care facility?
Family role within long-term care is paramount to the good care that person receives. Every admission that I've ever done, I have told the family that we are a team. I provide one aspect, you provide the other. And I need your feedback on how my performance is. Care homes themselves, COVID showed everyone just how important it is for families to be able to come in. The hardships, what they thought they were doing was helping people. What really transpired was quite egregious in another level. So families play a pivotal role. Not ever has it been stronger a need than on the day of admission, and making sure that you make clear what the expectation is for them to meet, so that they understand the parameters of what happy looks like for you, be that whatever within same-sex or other relationships. We've been having great discussions with the province, and we just sent in a submission that's going to that the language within the code. It needs to change in some ways. However, the ministry has always looked at family as being a much broader topic than blood relative or married partner. So if you come into a care home and you're being admitted by a friend like George, if George admits me, and by the end of this he may, if he wants to put me in and sign up and you go through all this stuff, he will be the one that they call and talk to. I may have a brother somewhere else, but if he's not the one that I'm identifying or have identified prior, then they will not be contacting him. It will be my chosen family. And that's the language that the ministry is trying to adopt. Just on a sidebar, in Nova Scotia right now, the regulations for long-term care are 50 pages. In Ontario, they're over 1,200. So when someone says we didn't meet the rules based on what the province has, now they're going to make more rules. So that makes sense to me. Just a rant, had to go off on it. But family, pivotal, important, you bet. You want good care, tell the staff you're coming back tomorrow. Tell them you're going to be there, and they will have your family member looking much better and ready than if you didn't say you were going to be there. And I know that sounds awful, but the truth of it is the squeaky wheel. The more you're there, the more you're a part of the team. And I've had care staff who say, oh, thank God Molly's here today. She can look after Betty for me. Okay, and I'm going to put Sally with her too because she loves her. It is huge to the staff. The ratios are crazy. In order to get somebody up in the morning, I beg you, look at how long it takes you to get up, do your constitution, brush your teeth, have something to eat, get dressed, get clean, and head out. In long-term care, the staff have less than 6 minutes per resident. Well, I don't know about you, but I can hardly fast in that amount of time. So, family, if I know that somebody's coming in, that I know that I'm going to be able to count on them to be able to say, I had a really hard morning this morning, your mom's in a bad mood, she's really yelling at me, I don't know what I'm supposed to do, but I'm really glad you're here. You will make a huge difference. Even every night, just popping in for a few hours to see how she looks. It makes a huge difference. Any care home that doesn't do that, you call the 1-800 come help me number to the ministry, and I beg you, they will be there and they will be guns blazing. Oh, they're gonna hire a whole bunch more new inspectors, so they even have more police. Well, that's interesting. In long-term care in Ontario, they're called inspectors. In British Columbia, they're called advisors. In British Columbia, when they come in, they say, hey, George, how's it going? In Ontario, they come in and they say, get your staff here, I can need to talk to them. So the difference is huge in different provinces. And so if there's anything that I can ask you to do, talk to your MPs, talk to your local people, tell them what you really want is less police and more assistance. Because that's the truth. If you know what the rule is, but you can't do it because you only got 6 minutes to get somebody out, there's no way you can be able to offer all that they say the laws have to be. So the best you can do is hit the ones that matter the most. Family matter the most. They really do. So it's huge. I hope that answers your question.
Okay, so we've got about 15 minutes left before we wrap this up. So I want to see if there's any other questions that come to mind right now. If not, there's one little issue that comes up time and time and time and time again. And we mentioned it earlier, and that's affordability. That, for some people in our community, is a big, huge issue. Some of our community have very good incomes, and they have really great pensions, and they can do very, very well. Others, not so much. Those people who rely upon CPP and OAS as their only source of income, they are going to find a challenge. So,
there is a question on
okay. And there's a question on Zoom, so we'll get to that first.
Lisanne, we see you have your hand up. Would you like to ask your question?
Yeah, it's the question is for Rick.
Okay.
I'm just wondering. You're probably aware of the project on Langley. There's some in Denmark. There's some in Belgium, which are specifically addressing long-term care for dementia patients. And they're trying to create a community, a bit like what the lady was talking about, you know, low rise, maybe 2 or 3 story. It handles basically as a village. It has a, you know, grocery store. People have fake money on there, but there's a park. Kids are invited to come and do activities. It's a living community. In one, I think that was in Belgium, they even had, because they have different cultures there, French, German, and different backgrounds, they have different sections to that complex, which is well secure, so that people who have dementia and have errands issues, you know, don't leave without people noticing. And they basically arrange it by sectors where people will, you know, recognize their German culture, their French culture, or whatever their background might be.
Okay, so Lisanne,
So I'm wondering if that's coming to Canada, if anybody's interested in doing that.
okay, so did you hear? Would you be able to summarize the question? Okay, so Lisanne, I think what you're asking, what Lisanne was asking is, oh, thank you.
Yeah, Mike.
Yeah.
Everybody loves the mic.
So I think what Lisanne was trying to ask is that Lisanne's heard about some kind of like dementia villages in Belgium and Denmark and other countries where they have, you know, a grocery store, kids are welcome, and it's just a nice little community. And Lisanne's wondering if either of you know if that's going to be coming to Canada or what the plans are. Lisanne, if you want to add anything, please mention it in the chat.
Thank you very much for the question. It is a good one. Internationally, we are looking at many different approaches to long-term care. And I think the one that you're talking about is the tower with the shopping underneath was Norway. In Australia, it's Dr. Tooth, and he's created some really great projects. There's the butterfly approach and how they do different things. In Canada right now, what we're really looking at least within the groups that I've been talking to, is that they're trying to figure out what is the best approach that I can take and what's affordable within the settings that they've got. And so is there currently anyone that's looking at building up anything like that? Not that I'm aware of, no. Not within Canada. There are within, like, in British Columbia, there are far more groups that have long-term care as part of a housing group, that's part of an independent group, that's part of a apartment building, and you have much more. I mean, I had a daycare in the basement of my home in Vancouver. There are many pros to having more community inclusion. However, that's about as far as Canada seems to be going right now, is getting into community inclusion. They aren't looking the same way as Norway did, but Norway's really, really progressive in that regard. The housing option in Australia, which is the Dr. Tooth plan, everybody has their own house and it's on the ground floor, and all the doors open into an open concept where they can walk and go shopping. There's a Tim Hortons, that kind of thing. So those are things they're looking at to try and see what they can do to build. But even in Australia, most people want their grandmother or their mother or their loved one close. And so in order to have everybody on a ground floor unit, that's a lot of real estate. So it puts them outside of the metro areas. So in response to your question, it's a really good question, but right now what Canada, or at least Ontario, what Doug Ford is looking at is creating more of the same, and yet increasing the number of inspectors that they have to go around to make sure that the rules are being looked at. However, within the Bill of Rights, and there are 27 different Bill of Rights, you will be interested to know that within those, you are guaranteed almost every right that you can be afforded. So there's nothing within long-term care that you shouldn't be able to say, the Bill of Rights says, I have the right to a lifestyle. That's written right in there. So my question was always to my staff was, we need to be prepared for this, because someday a lifestyle person is going to walk in who says, I'm a nudist. So, I mean, it's always the fun question to ask, right? But how do you accommodate everybody? Well, in some levels, it's impossible. You can't accommodate everybody, but we can accommodate many. And that's what we're looking at right now. Is what's the best process that we can do? And within the Bill of Rights, it's called, you have 27, and one of them is lifestyle choices, as well as intimacy.
So there's a comment here that says it exists to a degree in Langley, BC.
Okay, so the comment was that it exists to some degree in Langley, BC. So that's news to me. Great news. Okay, so we've got about 5 minutes left. Are there any other burning questions to be answered? Because there is one other thing I wanted to cover. Yes.
You spoke about affordable,
That's exactly what I was going to talk about.
but then is there any subsidized housing?
Okay, so that's exactly the question. Is there any subsidized housing? So there is rent geared to income. And if you want to get rent geared to income place, you fill out this application for the City of Ottawa, and that gets you on a list with several thousand other people. But for those people who are on very limited income, and I think that those are the ones that we're really talking about here, there is another list that a lot of people do not know about and are not aware of. And that is the application for below market rent housing in Ottawa. It's a separate list which is a subset of this master list of rent-to-income. And I'm aware of at least one person who filled out this and found a lovely apartment, right near Wednesday, at a very, very reasonable price. So it does exist, but you just have to know about it. And this is why I think that one of the things that would be really good to have is some type of system navigator, someone who would be able to give you the answers and guide you through. Now, there is a system that it does exist, and it's called 211. So you can phone 211 and say, this is my situation, help me out, I need groceries because I don't have anything left in my fridge. I need mental assistance and I don't know where to go. Where do I go? 211. A lot of people don't know about this service. It's available in something like 74 different languages. I mean, it's really quite a service which is available for free. So that's one thing. And the other is
You dialed the telephone.
211. That's it.
Where does that go?
Okay. So it's a Ontario-wide help system, just like 311. If you have a problem with your tree needs to be cut down by the city, you phone 311. Well, this is 211. Or if you need police, you dial 911. Same sort of thing. But it's a general helpline. If you need assistance with something, 211 is the number. So there's that. So I was talking about, and this is the other thing. And it's something we've talked about at OSPN, and there are a number of people, LGBT people out there, and they don't really have anyone to help them out. And, if they have family, they may be not close to their family, or their family may have said, I don't want anything to do with you. And they may have some friends and that sort of thing. But it would also be nice that, as Rick alluded to, when you need to go into a long-term care facility or into a senior's residence, it would be really nice to have an advocate, someone who will be there to be the squeaky wheel for you, to say, hey, Fred is not being properly cared for. I want to make sure that they are getting the service that they need. So that is another thing that I would like us to collectively think about is, do we really want to put our mouth and our actions where our hearts are? And that is to create some type of advocacy system within OSPN. We do have the telephone assistance program, which is run here out of the Good Companions. So if you want to have a buddy person who will phone you on a regular basis and say, hi, how are you doing? That already exists within OSPN, and it's not being well utilized. And I think this is a good opportunity. If you are sitting at home and you just like to have someone to check up on you every day or once a week, and they can do it by phone, email, text, whatever the two of you decide. But if something goes wrong, what happens is there's a checklist. The first thing is, and you designate your own checklist. That's important. But if Fred can't get in touch with you, they phone here, the Good Companions. Good Companions starts taking over. They say, okay, first thing on Mike's list was phone your neighbor, have them go and check to see if they're still okay. Or phone the police immediately, or whatever. former brother in Abbotsford saying we can't get a hold of, so Mike, whatever, right? But this is a service that already exists. And I think that, again, if you want to sign up for it, to be someone who does that call, then we're always looking for volunteers to help her with that. So with that, I think we've pretty much run out of time. And if there's no other questions,
There is one question here in the chat. Can you repeat the name of the second housing list, the second less known subsidized housing list?
Yes. That is called the application for below market rent housing in Ottawa. So, with that, I think we will conclude this morning. I hope that you found it useful. I hope we answered your questions. It probably brought up some more questions that you may not have been able to get to. But I hope that you found this morning useful and gives you some things to think about. And if I can only just reiterate, get yourself a copy of this housing options in Ottawa from Council on Aging, because it really does help pose some of the questions that you may want to be thinking about. So with that, I'm going to leave it to Amanda to say goodbye.
I just want to thank you both for your time and for sharing your information. I think that was very useful. I just want to mention to everyone also, the Good Companion has a lot of services to help manage things at home, to keep you at home. So I'll get Neville to put my information in the chat so that people can contact me. If you want information, you can talk to me. I can also refer you to the appropriate people at the Good Companion. I'm very happy to do that. I imagine Rick and George are also happy to take questions after. So thanks so much, everyone. Yeah, and I can refer to Rick if there's long-term care specific questions that you have. Okay, have a good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much.